Our guest tonight for the first part of the show is Patti Conklin. Patti, again, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me on, Pat.
A couple questions I've got for you. I've got a bunch of questions that were sent in, but something that stuck out in my head was you talked about when your kids were growing up, if you could kind of give us a little bit of a description. If they were to tell a white lie or a lie, just they weren't telling the truth, how visually does something like that look to you?
Oh, it will come in different ways. You know, one of the things to remember is every single one of us vibrate with each other differently because we have different frequencies. With Matthew, I'm auditory, and so his body would tell me in a hearing sense when he was telling me a white lie. Daniel, I was visual with, and so his body would literally right across his body. Daniel pretty much was on the straight and narrow most of his life. I really never got white lies out of him. Every once in a while, I'd get a white lie out of Matt, and I would just kind of watch him and just listen to what his body was telling me. And most of the time, I wouldn't comment on it because within a half hour, he'd just stomp out and sit down next to me, and he's like, "I hate not being able to lie to you." I was like, okay, so you want to talk about it now. But what it did for us as a family, Pat, was it didn't set up any walls. There were no boundaries. So as they continued to grow and develop, in their first relationships, even if there was, sexual questions about their relationships, we sat down and always discussed it. There was nothing that they felt that they couldn't bring to me because they knew I was going to see it anyways. And while I may not bring it up, they knew that I saw it. And so it created a freedom within the family to discuss anything and everything that needed to be discussed. And my friends would say, you do not have normal sons. Your sons don't talk back to you. They don't yell at you. They don't disrespect you. They don't do anything. They logically sit down and talk to you. And it's been an awesome journey with them.
Wow. And again, with them growing up in that environment, that's the thing with today. I mean, so many kids today, I think, are afraid. They hide so much from their parents. As kids, nobody wants to get in trouble and nobody wants to get scolded. I think the disciplinary actions have changed quite a bit. I do find it very interesting when people are negotiating with 3-year-olds
exactly.
in a store. We didn't have timeouts. We got knocked out back then. But I mean, having that openness is got to be a good thing. I mean, it's got to build for a lifelong relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I will never forget when Matthew was 17, and I had been out in Salt Lake. I was doing a lot of programs out there at that time, and I had come home, and I was in Denver the following weekend, and I came home for a few days, and he came into my bedroom, which the boys rarely do. I don't like frequencies in my bedroom. But he came in my bedroom, and he just looked at me, and he said, do you think you could take the next 3 days off and just hang out with me? And I'm like, well, sure. What's going on? And he's like, I've looked at your schedule, and you're really slammed for the next 10 weeks. And he said, I was at a party last weekend, and he said I was smoking some pot. Not a big deal. Hadn't done it in a year. But he said there were some guys there that were selling heavy-duty drugs. Mm-hmm. And you know what? They were making lots of money. And I'm thinking, maybe I want to do that. And I just kind of like to get your view on it. And I looked at him and I said, first and foremost, I love you. And I will support anything you ever choose to do in your life. Because I know on the day you die, you'll be where you're supposed to be. And my children are more agnostic and kind of Buddhist than anything. And I said, but this is the thing. I think that's going to be a little bit harder road, and there's 10,000 different ways to get from birth to death. If this is the road you're going to choose, I will be supportive of it. However, you won't live here. I won't have that type of lifestyle in my home, so you're going to need to move. but you're telling me you're already going to make lots of money, so that sounds cool.
Right.
We can have dinner. We can, meet at the theater once in a while, but you won't live here. And after 3 days, I'm like, I'm fine with canceling Denver, and just hanging out if you want to hang out for a few more days. And he just looked at me and smiled, and he's like, I've been thinking it over. I think that's just going to be kind of too hard of a road. Maybe I'm a little too lazy for that. I think I'll choose an easier road. And I just went, awesome. And I went in my room, and, as any typical mother, I'm like, oh, phew, cool. But to be able to have that kind of openness and not be reactive and spastic and be able for him to be able to feel as though he could openly discuss anything that was taking place in his life. I'd like to see more of that with parenting. And you're right, a 3-year-old, you do what I ask, period. Right. End of story. But as you get older, just know that freedom to say, I miss you, I need time with you, you've been gone a lot. And I'll never forget doing an interview with Women's Day, and Matthew was with me, and the interviewer asked him, we all have issues with our parents, what's yours? And he's like, abandonment. And I was just kind of looking at him, in not a bad way. It's not like you were out partying and in bars and dating men. You have been of service. But he's like, we've had to share you with the world. We've never had you to ourselves. And he's like, I miss that.
Wow.
And watching them choose their wives, of very nurturing women with very incredible mothers, very nurturing mothers, everything that I really wasn't capable of giving to them.
It's pretty deep stuff.
Yeah, but pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just
very awesome.
Yeah.
Let's get to a couple questions, okay?
Sure.
One of the questions, this is an interesting one. We're going to go a little bit all over the place on these.
Okay.
It says, Patti, do you have any theories about what the Egyptian pyramids were used for?
Wow. Nice question. I believe that we have had different civilizations throughout eternity on this planet. And, I believe that the Egyptian pyramids, certainly the Mayan structures and so forth, certainly have the capability and frequencies of reaching into outer space. And I do believe that it is a communication form of life on other planets, and I do believe that they were more developed or built with the use of crystals. People think that crystals have a lot of power, and yeah, they do, but they're a conduit, and they're only as good as the person wielding it. And so I think we've probably had, through evolution, just incredible beings who could communicate with other planets.
Interesting. Crystals, that's something, a lot of people buy crystals. Crystals are very healing. Do crystals, and I don't know much about them, are they something that vibrate and give a lot of different things off?
They vibrate. In fact, one of the classes that I teach, I actually take my class up into North Georgia, and we go gemming, and we'll pull different stones out, semi-precious stones, and I'll teach them how to look at the vibration pattern of what the stones are. But a crystal in the hands of someone who knows how to wield it can do surgery. A lot of the Peruvian, Latin American shamans are able to actually use a crystal to cut into a body and do healing. The thing that I always tell people, however, is that crystals in and of themselves can't heal you. They can make you feel better. They can help your auric field. But they're passive frequency. They're not active frequency. And so they're not going to get inside of your body and actually heal just by having them around you.
Gotcha. Because I know a lot of people talk about purchasing them, all different size. Ones do bigger, ones do different things?
No.
Okay.
No, they really don't. They feel good. But there's very few people that actually have the the capability to make them do something. Again, it's the ability of the holder, not the crystal itself. It's passive.
Gotcha. Another question, this comes from our friend in upstate New York. It says, Bill writes in and says, what types of diseases can you eradicate using your abilities to neutralize negative vibrations in cells? Now, maybe before you answer that question, we could back up a little bit. That is one of your gifts. You can see something going on with somebody, correct?
Correct.
How does let's just say that I've got something wrong with me, or an individual has something wrong with them. How does that appear to you? How can you explain that to me as a layperson? How do you see that?
Well, first, Bill, thanks for writing in, because I'm a fellow upstate New Yorker, having been born and raised there, so it's always nice to have an upstater on the line. It looks like this. Every single body is going to look differently. There's a few generalities. I've only worked with, 100,000. I haven't worked with 7 billion. So, these are generalities.
Okay.
Allergies are learned behavior. Anything in your body, I don't care if you've had severe environmental allergies for the last 10 years and you can only eat 2 foods and you've never been able to step outside of your home in the last 10 years. Within an hour, I can change your frequency so that you can go out to a smoky bar drinking beer and eating pizza. They're learned behavior, and it's very easy to shift. If you're looking at somebody with a spinal cord disease or an injury or MS, you're always looking at someone who typically has severe rage or hatred stored within their spine, and typically it's only once or twice that they've absolutely lost it to the extent where it was pure rage, and they'll store it about T7. Fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, Epstein-Barr are all boundary-setting issues. And they are individuals who are not able or capable of setting healthy, appropriate boundaries. And so when I look at somebody with that, fibromyalgia, let's say, they almost look like a mummy. Their particles will be still, and it almost looks like they're wrapped in a cocoon. And I'll know instantly we're dealing with boundary issues. They can't break free of the subsets. So it doesn't take any shape or form. If I'm working with somebody with cancer, there are times when I am able to contain it by changing the frequency of the particles around the cancer and actually cocoon it, so that when they go in for surgery, they literally find a white, milky substance around the cancer, and it will be contained within there. So it really, it jumps from person to person in how it looks or how I hear it, because people expect me to be visual because of my sight, but I'm actually auditory as my primary form. And so the bodies will speak to me much more than I'll see.
Does the body, now let me ask you this question. When a person meets you, sits down with you for a consultation, and let's say they're not feeling well, whatever it may be, and they come to you and say, hey, I'm afraid to go to my regular doctor. I haven't been feeling well. I want to talk to you about this. Just in a matter of minutes of a conversation, can something, if a person has something going on inside, does that, to you, Patti, does it sometimes just jump out immediately before you even, sit down and say, okay, let's look things over? Can things sometimes be so strong they just make their appearance very grandiose right in the first few moments of meeting somebody?
It doesn't even have to be something major. As soon as they open their mouth to speak, it's there.
Wow.
And what I like to do is bring it into their consciousness by having them figure it out, by asking leading questions so that they're thinking and working through things themselves. But the moment that somebody starts to speak, it's there. the other thing that takes place for me personally, and I know this is going to sound really bonkers, even more bonkers than everything else I've said, but when I look at a human being, an individual, their soul, for me, there's kind of this amorphous blob sitting on their left shoulder, and it's almost like they're in a rocking chair. And if there is a suitcase sitting next to that rocking chair, then I know that the soul's time here is done and that they will leave. And so we'll have people calling the office crying and saying, the doctors have given me less than 6 months to live, and I really need you. I want to stay here. And if that suitcase is sitting there, then I say, I'm sorry to say your doctors are correct. You will go within the next 6 months. Now, how can I help you be at peace with passing? And that becomes my job from that moment on. If the suitcase isn't sitting there, I go, well, I think maybe your doctor and I need to talk because I don't think they've found everything. You're not going to cross. So let me talk with your doctor, and we'll look at the next course of treatment for you. Or I will give them homework in terms of color or tone to start beginning the shift of their own frequency and homework that they can do. Everybody gets homework with me. But it really is just a matter of minutes as to whether or not it's something I can help with or something that I need to help them be at peace with.
Gotcha. Red from across the pond writes in and says, does Patti regard the polar regions as positive places to hang out, places of good vibration, or is the equator much different and more conductive to our well-being?
Wow. Great question on energy grid. Yeah. I think that from my experience, certainly the polar south and north poles are places of really extreme frequencies. And certainly I think it's every 26,000 years we go through a polar shift, which we've gone through recently. But the energies there are very pure, very pure. And, the equator just seems to be really jumbled. I think the more that human beings are at war with each other and certainly carry judgment and so forth, the more it's affecting the earth in terms of the energetic grid. But I would, if I had my druthers, I would certainly be at one of the poles.
Interesting. Another question from Carl says, Patti, do we all have the ability within ourselves to defeat illness using mind over body techniques like meditation?
Everybody has the capability. The thing to remember, at least from my experience and what I really believe, is that there's only two active frequencies in the world, and that's tone and color. Everything else is a passive frequency, and while it may help you feel better, it doesn't have the capability to shake loose the emotion from the peptides within your cells. That's really what's making you sick. So if you use a very simple, what I call color works, it takes 10 minutes, and you say to your body, what color do I need to remove the leukemia, from my body? Your body will make literal truth out of that statement, and you'll start bringing in colors. And maybe the first color will be black. People get fearful of black, but you've got to remember we're simply looking for a frequency. And so black is a very dense, heavy frequency that literally is violent as it moves up through your body, and that's what you want, because you want it to shake the emotion loose from the peptide within the cell. And even just a 10-minute exercise, you may start throwing up, but it's your body detoxing exactly what you asked it to do. So everyone has the capability of healing themselves as long as it's not a soul process to go through that experience. In my early 30s, I had both forms of lupus, and I had internal and external. It took out my right kidney. I had 2 heart failures, ulcerations, nerve damage, and I was critical for 3 years. And the doctor said, you're not going to live much more than another 5 or 6 years. And I was shown how to move color through my body, and I did it. Nothing happened. I went, whoa, he's showing me something that doesn't happen. It doesn't work. And I realized it was my self-worth, that I was working in PhD positions with a high school education, and I would work 100-hour weeks in order to prove myself to my colleagues. And as soon as I said to my body, what color do I need to remove my lack of self-worth, increase my self-worth by 80%, and remove my lupus, I stopped having symptoms, and within a year, my blood work was perfect, and I've never had a symptom since. And that's an incurable, always fatal disease. So obviously my soul path was to go beyond it. But if you're here to experience cancer and die of cancer, that's what will happen. What you can do, however, is shift how you feel about it. And that makes a huge difference in how you live your everyday life.
Wow, very interesting. I guess it seems like we have some choices, and sometimes we don't have some choices. When we don't have the physical choice to make of whether to stay or go, obviously dealing with it, and you help people deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really getting into a surrender. I'll never forget one of the just kind of serious but comical situations was a nun, a Catholic nun who had been a nun for 19 years, and she had developed breast cancer. And when she called the office and the office staff put her through to me, she was crying so hard. I mean, it was just heartbreaking. And I finally got her to stop crying, and I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, I've got breast cancer, it's stage 3, and, the doctors say it's moving into stage 4, and they don't think there's anything they can do for me. And I'm like, so what's the problem? And she's like, there's so much I want to do. I'm not ready to die. I'm going to fight this. I want to live. And I said, so wait a minute, you're a nun. So obviously you believe that there's a God. And she said, yes. And I said, so you've been doing God's work for 19 years. She said, obviously. And I said, so God's talking about maybe bringing you home, and now you're going to argue with him about it? And she was quiet. And I said, as far as I'm concerned, you're in a win-win situation. If you die, you get to go home. That's what your belief system is. If you live, you get to continue working. So what part of this am I supposed to feel bad about? And she just cracked up laughing. She just started laughing so hard, and she said, that is so true. So I'm like, yeah, it really is. I mean, you can make it the fear, but your body will heal so much faster if you move into surrender. And that's not giving up. I don't by any stretch of the imagination say give up. But understand, your body's making literal truth. And when you say, I'm going to fight this, your cells can only grow and protect. That's it. And so when you say you're going to fight something, your cells go into protection mode, and they actually start declining, and you get sicker. If you can go into surrender mode and say, I'm surrendering to this, I'm not giving up, but what is, and if I'm meant to cross, then I'm going to cross with joy and happiness and be at peace with this. As soon as you're able to do that, your cells go into growth and they start healing.
What about?
And so,
I'm sorry,
if you're not meant to go, you're not going to go.
What about people that things that just catch some people off guard, that just literally come out of nowhere? Or do you believe that,
I believe that everything's going to play out according to what your perception is. I believe that when a person is balanced and they're walking their path in their integrity and honesty according to what they believe, that you could walk through a radiation field and not be affected. As long as your body's not in fear, if you're not fearful of everyday life. I have flown 100,000 miles a year for the last 30 years, and people say to me, how do you, stay healthy being in the plane all the time and the recycled air and everybody being sick? Why don't you get sick? And I just look at them and go, why would I ever have a belief that I would get sick? Just because the guy sitting next to me has the flu and he's sneezing all over the place doesn't mean that I'm going to get sick. It means he has the flu. And it's as simple as that. So I think that when something comes out of nowhere, the most important thing is to not go into fear. And I categorize fear as forgetting every available resource, and that resource is what's inside of you. And you dig deep to that divine spark, and you calm yourself down, and you understand that if your blood work comes back askewed, and your doctor starts listing off all the things that could be wrong, what we tend to do as a humanity is we pick the one that we're most fearful of, and guess what? That's the one it is. And so if you can understand that your doctor has to tell you all of this because he's going to get his butt sued if he doesn't, and that it's your decision as to how much energy and emotion you're going to put into it. If you can allow it to be interesting and neutralize it, it's likely to develop into an actual physicality. Because before we had microscopes, we had a bad knee, we had a bad foot, our back hurt. We were very generalized. With the advent of microscopes, we began labeling. And in this day and age, the label itself is enough to create fear, to create the disease within the body.
Interesting. A couple more questions came in for you.
Okay.
Does Patti ever find that a person's good energy can be interpreted by some people as bad energy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's remembering that all of us vibrate at different frequencies. And if somebody is a vibrational, opposite of you, you're going to feel like, oh, they're an energy vampire. Some people use the term, or they've got bad energy. They don't feel good. Well, the reality is their energy is just different. If I were to open up into my full energy field, the BBC has even filmed me turning into a white light. I could say, wow, all of you must just feel, must be really bad people because you feel like you've got such low energy. It's the misnomer that we have to make it right or wrong. It's just a different frequency. And stop making it personal to the person that doesn't feel quite right to you. It's nothing about them personally. It's just vibrationally you're not a match.
Gotcha. Another question it says, on the subject of, this is Red from, he is in the UK, I believe. He says, Patti, on the subject of vibration, is a thunderstorm or an earthquake, a natural earth events, an environment that is necessary full of negativity?
When I look at a volcanic eruption, an earthquake, I think the Earth is going through its natural evolution of, compression and explosions and reforming and so forth from a frequency standpoint. It's not necessarily in a negative. I think I'm understanding the question. But it's not due to a negativity in a region, a negativity of the people of the region. I think there's two separate things taking place. I think that everything has to evolve, and the Earth certainly has its own frequency and its own areas of higher frequencies, lower frequencies, and areas that certainly have to go through the readjustment of frequency.
Okay. Sounds good.
I don't know if that made sense.
No, it does. It does. No, I mean it really does. Another question is, what are your thoughts on the metaphysical aspect of self-healing our bodies and our connection to a divine spirit?
I think that the most, the thing again for people to remember is spirit is, when you have it, let me rearrange my thoughts here. When you have an illness, it is your body, it is spirit, the divine spark, source, whatever, speaking through you into your body saying, hey, you have conditional thoughts going on in here that I need you to release. And a disease will develop not out of punishment, but because there's no frequency moving through. And when the frequency can't move, it becomes dense and disease develops. So people praying, for example, and pray to get better, that's not going to cut it. That's not going to take care of the emotional issue that's taking place. If I'm told to pull a disease from someone, I will typically pull about 80% of the disease because I need for the individual to continue to actually learn the lesson. And if I take the whole thing, then they won't understand the emotion that got them there to begin with. If Father specifically tells me to take a disease, then I literally will pull the whole thing out of their body for whatever reason between their soul and source in terms of them not having to go through the emotional component. But people need to understand their emotional, their words, even if they're talking about someone else, their own body is making it truth for them. Your body doesn't know you're speaking of someone else. Your body only takes every single word and emotion you say as truth for yourself, and that's what creates the disease.
Interesting. Deep stuff here, my friend.
I'm hoping that I'm making sense.
No, you are. I mean, you are. People need to be more, again, as we preach here on Fringe Radio. We've been doing it for coming on 4 years. It's about being open-minded. It's about being open-minded. I've got a question. I'm going to go out on a little bit of a personal thing. This is my own thing. I lost my daughter here just. It's going to be 3 months on Monday.
Goodness.
She was 18 years old. Now she,
wow.
Not going to go into all the details. We don't know all the details, but she had what we believe an illness that came on very, very quickly. Prior to this, she was fine. I mean, it was literally was doing good and went to the emergency room, and the next day no longer with us. But she was worried. She was I shouldn't say worried, but she was constantly and through your talk tonight, this just keeps coming up in my mind for some reason. Prior to this happening, she was talking consistently about wanting to live and wanting to be healthy. And in listening to the what you're saying here tonight, and I'm just going to throw it out there just to get your thoughts. Maybe her saying that she wanted to live and wanted to be healthy possibly could have been a sign that something was wrong. Is that a possibility? Because that's something she never really talked about. Her life was going absolutely great. You know, kids, hey, all the kids when they're 16, 17 years old, you know, there's a lot of confusion with relationships and you know, they love you one day and they hate you the next day, and you know how it goes. And was really living life great, but was yet so worried about being healthy to continue on. And just listening to everything that you've had to say here this evening makes me think that now, subconsciously, maybe she knew something.
I totally think she did. I think the soul, which speaks through our subconscious, was probably starting to get her prepared for it, because you can't die early, you can't die too soon, you can't die too late. You die at the appointed time. And when I say die, you leave the physical form, but your spirit, your soul continues on to its next journey. And we have timetables as souls. And so her saying, I want to be healthy and so forth, was probably her subconscious coming through that things were beginning to shift and change. And but, you know, as with anything, as soon as the soul starts coming out of the body, there literally is a serenity just a million times more than we can ever experience in this world. And you know, I had 12 deaths in the last 5 months. You know, my ex-husband and my father and 2 of my closest friends in the world, and a lot of additional friends, but those were the mains. And looking at each of them, and each of them saying that, I want to be healthy, I want to live, and realizing that the soul was moving more into their consciousness, that something was shifting. And it's a very normal human reaction to say, no, I want to stay. But once the soul starts to leave, then it realizes, that the conscious human thought evaporates, and the serenity is just profound. Every time I've had a visitation from Father, which has been many times throughout my lifetime, I cry for days because my body literally dissolves during that time period, and I feel so bereft at being left behind. And if it's any consult at all, I when somebody transitions, it's really a glorious time. But her knowing and saying those things, even though, like you said, it came out of left field and within a very short time she was gone, her soul definitely was preparing her subconscious.
I've often, just in this conversation tonight, that has come to mind a few times. Another question, Tanya writes in and says, Patti, how long does it take for you in general to move an illness from a patient?
If I'm giving them homework, I'll move a little frequency to get things started. But typically I'll give them homework for 30 days for them to do it themselves so that they realize they can begin doing it on a day-to-day basis. If I'm working with, let's say, an autistic child, a lot of times the soul will be not fully seated in the body, so it will take me maybe 5 or 10 minutes to seat the soul fully back into the body so that neurologically things are working. If I'm working with somebody with cancer and Father tells me to take the disease, literally a hole opens up in the palm of my hand and I will suction it out within minutes. My skin will turn green. I will vomit and be critically ill for 48 hours, and blood work will show the disease in my body for that 48 hours that it takes me to move it out. So it really depends on what process we're doing, and thank goodness I have awesome MDs who may not understand fully how this works, but if I'm personally ill, the first questions they have is, who have you been working on? What diseases have you been dealing with? So that we can rule out that something got stuck in your energy field and that you're just having a manifestation of the disease you've been working with. So it really, I think that's one of the things I love about my work is I never know what's going to come next. And, whether it's going to be just a few minutes and it's more emotional talk for people, or whether it's really getting in there hardcore and helping them pull something out.
Gotcha. What about going through some of the notes that you sent me, or Sarah sent me, I should say. She's a great person.
Yep.
Schizophrenia. Let me digress for just a second or two. I'm not a doctor by any means. I'm not an expert by any means. But I have in my life, I have encountered in my own family someone who, was diagnosed schizophrenic, bipolar, a whole bunch of other things. And as they got older, these things got more intense. Episodes going to, the hospital and for observation and all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. But I sometimes wonder, are there people, I believe that there are people that truly are schizophrenic. They have mental disorders. I don't like to use the word crazy, but they have mental disorders, which can make them act out, make them hurt themselves, hurt other people. And then I believe there's people that maybe are seeing, maybe people say, oh, that person's crazy acting, but maybe they're like in your case, you have a gift. Some people may have a gift, not a similar gift, but maybe a type mm-hmm. of gift that's given to them that's very unique that none of us have or not many people have, and they just don't know how to interpret it. What are your thoughts on that and people that have mental disorders?
I agree with you on both aspects. I think that there are people, certainly when I was tested, when I was being tested by science, the psychiatrist who was testing me just looked at me and said, the reason you feel so different is because you are. And I'm convinced that if you didn't have the IQ that you have and have had this and learned how to cope with it throughout your life, you would have been locked up at a very early age because you never would have been able to comprehend what it is you're seeing. And I fully believe that. I believe that there are people who are gifted that maybe don't have the comprehension level to understand what it is they're looking at. And they lose touch with reality, certainly during hormonal shifts, male and female. You really have to be careful to stay in reality. It's really easy to move out of reality. So I think that takes place. You also have individuals who have actual neuron breaks within their brain. And I've been working at nighttime with a little 11-year-old little boy who's been incredibly violent, grabbing knives and trying to kill his siblings and his parents. And he comes from a very loving, nurturing home, but he has 3 neurological breaks. And so I'm just working on repairing the neurons so that his brain is functioning well. So I think that we have so many different aspects of what's taking place. But in schizophrenia specifically, more often than not, it's individuals that are seeing the world differently and they don't know how to express it or explain it, and people label them as crazy and shun them, or they get institutionalized because we don't understand it.
That's kind of my thoughts, is that especially here in this state, and it's kind of gone on the record. It's no secret that the issues with antidepressants, and I believe in the state of Utah, is the highest in the country, one of the highest in the country. Mm-hmm. And of course, a lot of people said, well, these young parents, they've got a lot of kids and they've got to deal with things, and it seems like it's so easy for in today's insurance and today's systems, there just isn't the time for the evaluations, and it seems like more and more professionals are they're writing a script and go, here you go, this will help things out.
Absolutely.
And I've seen both sides of that. I've seen that actually help a person, and then I saw them it changed, it altered the person where they quit taking it, and the reaction when they quit taking it was absolutely terrifying. And I think people need to be aware of that. You can't quit some of this stuff cold turkey, and I don't think you can start this stuff cold turkey.
Yeah, I think that definitely they'll never stop at cold turkey. But people have forgotten how to have fun. I mean, people forget how to relax and just take it easy. One of the things that I just did in having 3 new grandbabies is I left my beautiful lake sanctuary and moved up here. My sons all sold their houses and bought houses near each other so they could raise their sons together. And I was an hour and a half away, and traveling so much and being on the road so much, I wasn't around. So I just bought a houseboat and put it at the nearest lake 20 minutes away. And so I'm going to live out on the houseboat. And I thought, how fun is this? I mean, I should have done this years ago. I think that we've forgotten how to take time and have fun. I think that we get so caught up in the dynamics of the fast-paced life that it's easier to take a pill than it is to take time out of your schedule. And what's more important is taking the time out of the schedule and playing, because that in and of itself will balance somebody so strongly. But as you pointed out, if someone truly neurologically has those breaks within the neurological system, then the medication can truly be a lifesaver for them. And they need to be on it until they can rework their neurons. And they can rework their neurons using color or tone, just depending on the situation.
What about spirits and angel guides? Or spirit guides and angels. Sorry, I read that wrong.
Yep, spirit guides and angels. They're wonderful. I mean, souls when they depart this world, they're either going to go on to the next sojourn, or they're going to kind of stay in flux for a while, and maybe they'll be a guide to a human being. But the difference, the way you can tell the difference is a spirit guide is going to have a sense of humor. They're going to be, you're going to feel this energy next to you of somebody chuckling, and it's a guide. It's someone who's had human form. Angels are very robotic. They don't have a sense of humor, and they certainly are not going to chuckle with you. They're very robotic. But I think in both cases, there's not a difference. There's not a hierarchy in the outside space. But what I think the purpose of guides and angels is for human beings, I think we've kind of gotten away from this, but I think what it really is to help people remember what source energy is, and to remember that there is a source energy out there, and the angels and the guides are the conduit to help remind us. An angel or a guide, we can say they're protectors or whatever, but you've got to remember every experience you've ever gone through, you've learned with every breath that you've taken, and if you've learned, it can't be a bad experience. Good always comes out of bad, and I don't care what it is. Good will always come out of bad, and it may take a while, but the guides and the angels are there to help us remember what that frequency is of source and what we're leading back to as souls.
Patti, you've said some unbelievably inspiring things here tonight, and I wanna thank you so much for giving us your time. Why don't you put out there for the listeners, if somebody needs your assistance, if somebody needs some help, or wants to talk to you, how do they go about doing that?
They can call the office at 404-474-4294 and talk to staff and make an appointment. They can certainly go onto the website, patticonklin.com, and Patti's with an I, and look at the different sessions and availabilities and so forth, and kind of see what fits right for them. Get the book. I think the book is a very simple read and yet a very profound read in terms of individuals' aspects of life. So they certainly can call the office and talk to Vanessa or Sandra or whoever answers and get an idea, and if they feel it's the right thing to do, to book an appointment and talk to me or come to any of the events that I'm teaching at over the next few months. In 2 weeks I'll be in Buffalo, and then Syracuse, and the Ohio Metaphysical Expo in October. And they can certainly see me at any of those venues. So just visit the website and see where I'm going to be. And if you'd like me to come to an area near you, give the office a call, and we'll see what we can arrange.
Well, I think tonight you have you've inspired me and our listeners, and I want to thank you so much for your time. Are you living on your? Are you going to move onto your house? Are you living on your houseboat? Are you living aboard full time?
I will be living aboard Monday morning. Will be my first day as the live aboard. I've been staying with my son Daniel and his wife and baby the last 3 months until I found the boat that I wanted. And we got it moved to the dock, and I'm right at the end of a slip, so I've got the whole lake to look at. And
what kind of boat did you buy? I'm a boater by heart.
I just a houseboat, just a little tiny houseboat for this year, just a 42-footer, just a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, kitchen, beautiful living room, top deck, and so I for me, that's the most soothing. And so I'll be living aboard when I'm not traveling, and I'm certainly planning on cutting back on traveling. We have a fourth grandbaby coming up in January, and my reason for being here is my sons gave so much to me during their teen years and growing the business and making CDs and doing all of that stuff that I want to be able to be here for them as much as I can be, and helping them with their families and watching their awesomeness and being parents. So it's but the houseboat is definitely is very selfish for me in my relaxation.
Well, it sounds great.
Looking forward to it.
Patti,
Thank you.
I'd love to get you back on again down the road. I know you got a busy summer and fall ahead, but let's stay in touch. And again, it was an honor to have you here tonight. Thank you so much for giving up your Saturday night for us.
Thank you so much, Pat. I'd love to come back. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and take care. Blessings.
Okay, Patti. Good night. Take care.
Good night.